They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Loan you that college promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Program to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of all nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Tonight on Rogueways, we are deeply honored to be in the company of a great mind and a warrior in the fight against the globe-spanning plot to remove any and all freedom and sovereignty from the regular person and create an ironclad control system that envelops your economic well-being, your social well-being, your mental well-being, and your governmental well-being, and does so entirely under the guise of public health. We've long talked about this exact series of attacks on Rogueways, but never with a Harvard graduate, doctor, and scientist, speaker, and author, activist, and proponent of every human's well-being. And most recently, the author of COVID-19 and the Global Predators, We Are the Prey. Dr. Peter Breggin, welcome to Rogueways, and thank you so much for taking time to be here with us tonight. It's good to have you.
Well, wonderful energy.
Oh, thank you.
I needed it too, because it's 9 p.m. at night.
Oh, we'll try to keep it brief for you. We're so honored to have you here tonight. And I often try to list people's other books in the intro as well. But as you mentioned before we started, you have, what, 20 others?
Yes.
So I wasn't going to list them all, but I know the fans of Rogueways, many of them know you so well. Many of them have been begging for me to have you on for so long. I'm so glad.
That is so nice. That's very sweet. Thank you.
I'm very grateful that we finally get to connect. And before we do, I just want to let everyone know Mother's Day sale is still going. If you go to the site rogueways.org and you grab any piece of orgone you like, you can use the code Blessed Mother and get a little discount on that. We'll go a little bit longer with that sale, so because we love the mothers. And I also have started a new Buy Me a Coffee. It's buymeacoffee.com/rogueways. So if you like to buy me a coffee, go for it. I will appreciate your contribution. I'm so grateful to all the listeners and watchers out there. You guys are the best. So, Dr. Breggin, I do like to ask a pointless question of the episode before we dig into the meat and the potatoes. And that is, what is the best music to dance to?
I was just hugging my wife to music tonight. She's playing me all this rebel music today. Levy, what's his first name? He's so great.
I don't know.
Oh my God, you don't know him?
No.
He just he sings songs about America and freedom.
Ooh.
He was on one of the big shows at one point. He didn't win, but oh God, you don't know about him.
Yeah, I bet my audience will too. They'll be like, what?
Yeah, they I just missing his first name for some reason.
Oh, I'm the worst at
he's
knowing.
He's a big,
things.
heavy set man. He sang tonight Hallelujah, a couple of bars. Ginger put him on for a couple of bars of Hallelujah, which I think all he did. He's got this real bass, and then he goes up to a falsetto. It's like, and he sings at all the truckers. Maybe you don't even know who the truckers are.
I know.
He sings it
I know the
at all the
honk honk.
convoys.
Yeah, the trucker revolution.
Yeah, he sings it at the convoys and stuff.
Oh, how beautiful!
It's great.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, that is the best music to dance to. You're right. I'm gonna agree with you.
Freedom music.
Yeah. We need music to keep people's spirits lifted. It can be so easy to fall under, into depression and into just wanting to give up because it seems so huge, this problem we're facing in the world. And I know you are more familiar with it than most people because you have, dove into it academically. And that's what this book is. So I told you before we started, I read it in the college way because I read it because it's written like an academic text. And I appreciate that. It makes it much easier.
Well, it isn't. Now, wait a minute. The writing is better than an academic text.
Yes, but you know what I mean?
Some
the
people have
organization...
even said it's like a thriller.
Yes, no, that's true. I didn't mean to make it sound not exciting, but
really?
I just mean...
I've spent my whole life getting over writing like an academician.
No, I just meant the organization is so solid. You understand how to
Yes, I
present
really
ideas.
organized it
Yes.
and made every chapter interesting title, but still giving you subject.
Yes. Oh, and
I really don't know why authors give really these cutesy titles to chapters. And so what? I mean, what's it about?
I need to know what's going on here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a well-written book. It's really great. Your resume is also well written. You have a long and impressive career behind you, and more in front of you, including graduating from Harvard with your doctorate. And I'm wondering if you.
No doctorate at Harvard.
Oh, my bad.
Besides, I have an MD.
Ah.
I got my MD from Case Western Reserve, and then I had some of my training at Harvard, where I was teaching fellow, they called us, at Harvard Medical School, and then a variety of other things.
And did you feel in those practices and your preparation for it that even then you were being sort of trained or indoctrinated into systems or ways of thinking that weren't actually as helpful for people? Do you feel like you had to break out of that eventually?
No, I didn't have to break out of it. I came in with a tremendous understanding, I thought, but it really wasn't even deep enough, of just how shallow and twisted organized psychiatry was, the whole biological model. But I got involved when I was a 19-year-old at Harvard, and a friend invited me to come out and volunteer in a state mental hospital. And I got such a sense of first how much they needed attention and caring. And then I had this sense of they're not really different from me, given enough misery I could have landed there. And then I had a sense of how everything that was being done to them was bad. Lobotomy was going on, psychosurgery was this part of lobotomy, and electroshock, and toxic drugs were just coming in, the really bad drugs in 54 that are still with us. And I found that when I just hung out with people, they felt better. And so we organized, in addition to having a couple of hundred Harvard Radcliffe students coming through, we organized a case aid program, we called it. We had supervision of one very good-natured social worker, and about 12 of us were given our own patients. And that was the first time I ran into politics. The Psychoanalytic Institute of Boston, the premier psychoanalysts in the country in Boston, didn't like us without any licensing, training, or anything, talking with patients in the state mental hospital. I'd never seen any of them in the state hospital. And then I think they even less liked when, of the 15 patients we had, 15 of us, we got 12 of them out of a hospital. So it was like, holy moly. So I became a bit, or even at that early age, a celebrity. I had my picture in the Saturday Evening Post, and our program was written up in a lot of different places. So in those days, social psychiatry or psychological psychiatry, or even the kind of cultish psychoanalytic psychiatry, they all had a little wings. The dominant was still good old drugging and making up biological theories and genetic theories. So I was having such a success. I was working with Harvard doctors, and they were, at the end, I'm only 20 years old before I go off to med school. So I decided that maybe I could really have an effect. But I could see that by the time I got into my first year of training, which was at Harvard, that Harvard had done a bait and switch overnight from having a psychological wing to it, and a lot of therapy, to being a drug company salesperson, and training people to administer wards, coerce people, diagnose people, drug people. I remember it was so telling. I met a man that I'd worked with when I was in the state mental hospital, because he was at the time the director of research at the Harvard facility, which was the Massachusetts Mental Health Center. And he later became the head of NIMH. And he wanted to meet me and say hi. And he's, Pete, what are you working on? What are you thinking about the future, your future as a psychiatrist? I said, well, I'm still really interested in how do we understand people? How do we get an idea of personality? And, there's so much more to be understood. How do we really help people? And he looked at me and he said, Pete, it's not going anywhere. He said, from now on, it's going to be computer diagnosis and psychiatric drugs. And he was so pleased with himself because I'm sure he felt much better not relating to people.
Yeah, let the robots do it. Oh,
Let the robot. And so this really made me realize that. I went on, though. I still had such credentials. I went on to the National Institute of Mental Health for 2 years after my training was done. And then I didn't think there was any place for me. I had thought I was going to be the youngest psychiatrist to be a professor at Harvard or to be, president of the American Psychiatric Association. And I realized I don't believe in anything they're doing anymore. So I went into private practice and I did something I'd always wanted to do. I started writing novels. I got 2 published novels, believe it or not. And in the process of the second novel, I found out of starting it that the lobotomy was coming back. So I'm in private practice. It's 1968. I got maybe 69. I got actually it was 1970 exactly. I got long hair and I got jeans and I see my patients. I'm real informal. And I look at this psychiatric newspaper and the lobotomists are meeting again. The lobotomists are coming back. And these are the people who just mutilate the front of your brain. They mutilate the highest centers of the brain and call that, a treatment. And what it does is it makes people brain damaged and docile and unable to protest. It's very sad what it does to people. And it was so grotesque, and I didn't see anybody complaining about it. I said, I think I have to put a stop to this. I mean, I'm not sure what I was thinking. But it was something along those lines. And I thought there'll be other doctors who, work with me. And I happened to be living in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. So I did everything in my power to learn everything I could. And I developed a lot of writing and stuff about it. But I couldn't get published because every time I even got calls with journal publishers. Oh, no, I know so-and-so. He's a good guy. We're not going to criticize what he's doing. Things like that. I couldn't get it anywhere. Newspapers. I didn't know. See, what I didn't know is that the science writers are all in collusion with the most interesting, exciting doctors who may give them national awards for medical journalism, those kind of folks. And I was about to give up. And I thought to myself, there's something called the Associated Press. That's how dumb I was. I said, I've got this publication that's just come out. Because I did get the interest of congressmen. Publications just come out in the Federal Register. It's 100 pages about lobotomy coming back. Big deal. Nobody's interested. So I called the Associated Press. And I said to the guy, I said, do you get the congressional record? And I'm hearing this clacking in the background. Those are the days when they would teletype them. And he says, yeah. What do you think the clacking is? I think it's coming in now. It comes in about this hour. I said, oh my God, can I tell you a little something? So I gave him a 5-minute sketch and he said, you know what? Our science writer's not in. I'm really sorry about that. He's on vacation. I said, would you do it? He said, if you spell the words for me. And he sent out, because he was a normal human being and not a science writer, suck up. He wrote a 500-word summary of started my reform work that went all over the world, and I was in business.
That's a miracle. That
beautiful. Was a miracle.
Yeah.
I think, it's like, I really think that God, it's not out of arrogance, because I don't think I'm the only person on earth God guides.
No.
Millions and millions of people pray and think about God and try to sense what they want, what he's giving, or she is giving. And, even the Catholic catechisms say that God has no gender. That's not what God is.
Yeah.
But I feel that a lot. And I was without ginger then, and I divide my life into BG and AG, before and after ginger.
I love that. That's so sweet.
It wasn't until 1984 when I've been doing a lot of work up to then. By the way, I stopped this thing from coming back around the world.
Thank God.
It was. Now, what ginger recently, when we started to do the COVID, And Ginger said to me, there's this stuff about transhumanism. Well, what is that? And so we're learning about it because they're the bad guys, the globalists. They're all pushing transhumanism, and it's quote improving the human being technologically through many things, including interventions in the brain. Boy, was that familiar to me.
This is the definition of hubris, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Whew.
exact. Oh, and these surgeons I was going up against, people said you can't debate William Sweet, the chief of neurosurgery at Harvard, and stuff like. But it was easy, it gave me a new saying, which is you don't have to be a brain surgeon to be a brain surgeon. These guys were just butchers. They didn't know any science. And there's almost no science of the brain, and there was less science even then. But even now, we can't connect the thought to our brains. We can't connect any complex things to the activity of our brains. It's just there's nowhere near anything like that. But so I got inspired and went on to become a lifelong reformer, facing up to the bad guys.
I love
Then
that.
a real transformation. Then the second, probably biggest thing I became involved with, and then the third, where after Ginger arrived. And she'd only been with me a short time when I got asked to be the single scientific expert, legal expert for all the combined Prozac suits. There were like over 100 Prozac suits. I had been somewhat critical of Prozac, even though it was barely out, in a book called Toxic Psychiatry, which was written right when Ginger arrived, and she really helped me improve my style a lot. If I'm academic, then you come and make people think I'm writing in an academic.
Sorry. Yeah.
She'd work to help me not write like that. She'd
Good
look
job,
at chapters and she'd pick up a chapter and get sad looking, and I'd say that's still not right. And she said, no, I don't think so. She said, try some anecdotes, tell a story. And Toxic sold extremely well. And then we co-authored together Talking Back to Prozac, which was more of this kind of intense research. But that really prepared me for COVID-19, because I ended up being empowered by the judge to go in and look at the records of Eli Lilly, their scientific work, and was it valid or wasn't it valid? And I realized that these companies, and I was shocked, nothing med school was ever said about you can't trust the drug companies. I was never told that you might as well not even read the so-called gold standard controlled clinical trials, which are the pure science of the drug companies and psychiatry. They're not even read them because they're so corrupt. You don't know what they've put in. You don't know what they've taken out. All you do know is the guys that are doing it are working for them and have no control over it. And the company controls the whole process. PR department figures out what they want to say about the trials, and they publish them. Well, I could not believe how corrupt they were. Because we were finding lots of indications that Prozac was causing violence and suicide, mayhem, just terrible things, psychosis and mania. And it does. And we alleged, alleged fraud. Actually, I didn't do that part. That's the part that the lawyers do. And what I found out from reading the internal memos and stuff was they had no concern about if they were actually hurting people. They didn't care whether any particular shooter was on Prozac, for example, and some of them were. They only cared about preserving their reputation and making the ton of money they saw coming, because they'd been advertising for this years ahead of time and paying doctors off years ahead of time to prepare the world and talk about depression as a biological disease, when it is not. It's a spiritual collapse, basically emotional, psychological, spiritual distress, giving up. And the deeper it is, probably the more real it is as a human phenomena.
Yeah.
And because actually when people have a brain injury, they get shallow. They don't get deep. They don't have profound sadness stuff like that when they have brain injuries, which most people don't realize. So when you
That's a good
give
point.
people drugs and you shut down their brain and stuff, they get more shallow. And if they're injured, they get more shallow. I mean, it's the human passion that makes people so disturbed and so remote. Well, this is certainly not accepted by psychiatry in general then or now, although it's patently obvious if you work with disturbed people. And you don't set yourself aside from them and imagine you had never been like that and you never could be like that because they're aliens or something, which is the psychiatric view. We'll categorize them as something schizophrenic, bipolar, anything but suffering human being. So that was the beginning of preparing me. And then Ginger had been working with me. Ginger had discovered around the same time that I got invited into the Prozac scene, she discovered that the federal government, the highest ranking psychiatrist in the government, had held a national mental health meeting with the leaders saying that they were developing an entirely new interagency, really exciting new plan, lots of funding. They were going into the inner cities of America and they were going to find out why these little children were genetically and biologically so violent.
Wow.
It's like eugenics at its most bizarre and outlandish.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And we ended up writing another co-authored book. Originally, it was in the hardback, it was titled The War Against Children, but when we bought it back and put it in paperback, we called it The War Against Children of Color. There's a whole description of it in there. It's a hard book to find, though. We'll reprint it someday. But so we developed quite an understanding of the workings of the federal government through this. I testified in front of government agencies. We got all of that research canceled. We had a conference canceled. I mean, it was just, and we worked with the Black Caucus of the Congress, because naturally they didn't like this. And at times, I've also worked with the conservatives of caucus. That's the first, with the conservatives of the Senate. That's the first time I had ever talked to a conservative. I was a grown man. Wow. And my daddy had taught me they were very bad people. And they seemed more like me than I seemed like my daddy, honestly.
Yeah. This is like the lie that all of us liberals were told, that Republicans are all racist, hateful, misogynist, all these things. And then you finally one day find out they're not. And that's very confusing. Why did they lie to us about that?
They were misled. They were propagandized.
Yeah.
So this is sort of a rollicking interview. It's got themes to it, though. And
I love it. I love hearing about how you came to all of these things, and I also love hearing that spiritual aspect of it and the love aspect of it with Ginger coming into your life, and how you two have done this together as well. It's a really
40
beautiful
years.
story.
We've been doing this for 40 years together.
Wow. I think that's so important, and I think especially in this time where everything is under attack, and we'll get to that eventually, because you talk about how our shared value system actually is part of what's under attack, and that involves things like marriage and the family, and a lot more than that.
Even love. Individuality and freedom. They hate patriotism. This was a revelation to me, that there were these thousands of very powerful billionaires, agency heads, progressive and supposedly capitalist billionaires and big corporations who were trying to be woke but were still capitalists supposedly, and in a whole bunch of them, everyone we tracked, and there's a lot of them we track in the book, not a one of them had any kind of faith or belief in anything except predation.
Yeah.
None of them, even the Americans like Bill Gates and many others, Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York, is a big globalist. None of them are patriotic. None of them believe in America. None of them in their writings, even in their analyses of politics in the world, ever even mention the founding of America. They go from Marxism to something else. They skip it. They don't have any belief in individual freedom. They have no idea that we already have a solution to the woes of the world, which is to spread constitutional democracy or democratic republics as far and wide as possible and keep them honest, which we're now losing in America. But that's what brings peace. That's what ends famines. That's what allows the middle class to thrive. It's the only system that's ever allowed the working and middle classes to thrive. And of course, they hate us for all those reasons because they want to sap all the lower and middle classes. All of this is kind of new to me. I mean, I have read and thought about different things, but I never put it all together about what we were up against. And I think they were driven out in the open when Trump was elected. They went crazy because one of Trump's rallying cries was that he was against globalism. The first president since, I don't know, Lincoln, who was against globalism. I mean, George Washington was against globalism, told us not to get involved in this and that. And then it gradually gets eroded because these guys want power and they want to hobnob with Europeans and Chinese and anybody else they can do business with. But I view myself as kind of a founder and in my philosophy, and I view what we need to do is a refounding of America and a reclaiming of ourselves. And that's what I call my TV show. It's on Breggin TV. It's actually a real TV show. You can get it on Roku.
I love that.
On Roku under Breggin TV, and you can also our videos. I got taken off of YouTube 45 minutes after I published my first video about the book.
I am not surprised at all. They are so good at removing content that doesn't just toe the line of the narrative that they want people to have, their globalist, eugenist, transhuman agenda. If you're speaking out against that, exposing it in any way, then you're a filthy liar, and you should be. And now we have this whole Department of Homeland Security's what are they calling it? It's not the Ministry of Truth, but it should be called that.
That's what you think. No, it's the Ministry of Disinformation. That's what they call it themselves.
Like, they don't even have an awareness of how ironic they are. Or maybe they're doing it on purpose. I don't know. Maybe they're rubbing it in. Like, haha, yep, we are the Ministry of Truth. It's so overwhelming sometimes. And what's overwhelming to me, too, is how many people you can ask very gently. Like, so how do you feel about the government now bringing the force of the law against those who may not agree with literal propaganda? That doesn't sound like a good move. It doesn't sound like a freedom or a democratic republic sort of value, or, what do you think about this? They'll be like, well, we should, crack down on these people who are spreading disinformation.
Yeah.
Why? How did we get so blind to this and so convinced
Well, it's
of the
been a
evils?
lot of progressive education and progressive politics, progressive movies, progressive newspapers. They have been very, very good at taking over things, and we have not been. In fact, I founded an organization back in '72, and Ginger built it up starting in '84. And then we selected some leaders who we thought were sympathetic to us, and we kind of stood in the background. We became emeritus, but expecting to participate. And they turned out to be progressives. They were lying, cheating progressives, and they took over the organization.
Wow, that's
scary. I watched them take the name of my organization in vain. And Ginger turned to me and said, "You know what, honey, I never trusted them. I actually still own the name of the organization. I'm going to turn them black." So she turned off their website.
That's awesome.
And they screamed and yelled and they sued us. And this is when I was Ginger was, we'd only been together a few years. I had no idea. It was just so much to this human that defied what she was capable of. So she took charge of the defense. She gave us some ideas to the lawyer, explained. It was so interesting. She said, we have to get into a new and interesting area of branding. Because if you go and you put in the name of this organization, it comes up almost every time only associated with Peter Breggin. If you put in the name of, say, the New People into Google, they don't come up at all in relation to the organization. If you put in your name, it comes up 300,000 times in relation to the organization. She said, I think we can argue that possession is a big part of the law, and I never gave them, and I always paid for the URL. I mean, whatever it was, the name of it, the Center for the Study of Psychology and Psychiatry, and so we had it in our hand. They were threatening criminal charges. Oh man, they had an amazing time, and they were really mean and nasty. And it had to go to arbitration under the rules of not Netscape, but Net something, whatever that big group was that held all these things. And it went to arbitration to a lawyer in Brazil. The lawyer in Brazil came back and said, well, they do have one, the other side has one claim that, that they were given the organization to run it. And that's a very important, and that's an important claim to the name of the organization. But the Breggins own it, the name, and it's his brand. So he agreed with Ginger's formulation. And then he said, and I don't have to say this, he said, but concerning all their allegations about him, I admire greatly as a reformer.
Oh, I love that.
It's like, what, did God spring fairy dust on you?
Yes. A tenacious woman.
We've had a lot of experiences like that. Of her showing up in this really strong manner. It's not even close to the only time, or even the most important. They went after my license for remarks I made on Oprah Winfrey, and in favor of psychiatric drugs. I mean, in favor of people having a choice about psychiatric drugs.
Oh.
And up to then,
that means they can choose not the drug, so you can't say that.
Can't say that.
Oh God.
And so Ginger, our lawyer, said, you got to get along with these people, be a colleague, because I was being challenged by the first step was you have to go through in Maryland, you have to go through the Maryland Medical Association, a branch of the AMA. I did not belong to the AMA. I've been critical of the AMA. It's about 20 guys, all of them I thought were going to be kind of fascists, those gets attracted to those jobs. Mm-hmm. And our lawyer said, you got to get along with them and so on and so forth. So Ginger looked around. She came back to me. She said, honey, I've really been talking to people. They only understand fear. We have to go to the press and hammer them and shame them, make them aware. I said, well, I'm not sure we can do that. She said, well, I used to do a lot of publicity and stuff. I said, well, I wasn't sure I remembered that. She got stories, 3 in the New York Times, against the wishes of the science writers, into the Washington Post. She got it covered by Daniel Goleman, the great science writer.
Wow.
And she got it in AP and everywhere. And it was all about freedom of speech. See, we couldn't do it today. You know what? We couldn't get that many people right about freedom of speech. That was really the only issue that people were concerned about, that a psychiatrist couldn't go on the air and say that if you don't like your psychiatrist and he's giving you a drug for the first time, don't take it. Go find somebody you like and who is going to inspire you. That's basically what I said. Oprah asked me at the last minute, what do you do if you go to a psychiatrist? And I said, well, if he doesn't seem to care about you and he gives you a drug on the first visit, you don't have to take it. Put it in your pocket, go away. I said, but don't argue with him. That's dangerous. Just go away. Get out.
Smart.
And that's what they went after me for. And they got an AstroTurf, a drug company, the group called NAMI, National Alliance of Mentally Ill, funded by the drug companies who I'd been attacking already in toxic psychiatry. And we beat them up so bad Ginger beat them up so badly that when we went to the vetting, the basic, to the AMA meeting first, and then they're going to recommend whether or not we go to the license, have my license evaluated. And they weren't going to let Ginger in. And I said, I'm not going in. Well, they relented. Ginger went in and our lawyer went in. And I thought there's probably one guy I can't trust the most, probably the psychiatrist. I'd never heard of him. I didn't take the time to look him up. Not smart. So much was going on. So he's sitting in the corner. And these guys is, well, you know, and there's another thing, Doc. You said the psychiatric drugs cause brain damage. This big OBGYN guy, kind of guy he used to try to bully girls on the playground. You know, he becomes an OBGYN, you know, that kind of thing. So I look at him and I say to him, do you know what tardive dyskinesia is, Doc? Can you give me a definition of it? Now, tardive dyskinesia afflicts 5 to 8% a year of people taking the major psychiatric drugs at the time, you know, the Haldol, Thorazine, all those drugs. Now it includes things like Abilify and Zyprexa, Seroquel. Terrible. They cause terrible neurological disease that the patients are almost never told about, although they should be under every law and rule.
Yeah.
And I said, you don't know what it is. I said, well, then, would you like me to give you a little presentation about it so that you can understand why I have to go on TV and talk about it? Because even doctors don't know. And the psychiatrist raises his hand and says, go ahead, doc. It turned out he was a family therapist. He wasn't really doing psychiatry. He was an old time guy, you know, the kind of psychiatrist. So I gave them this lecture. And then afterwards they said, well, they met and they said, we're going to recommend that they not bring any charges against you. But don't you go to the press and tell anybody because it's just our recommendation. Don't you do that. So the lawyer says, no, we better not do that. Ginger says, I got the phone numbers of Dan Goleman and 10 other science writers and other guys around the country. Just wait to hear. She says, she always had boundary problems with me. She says, our medical license is not as important as our freedom of speech. Our freedom of speech first. I said, that sounds like good advice to me. Yeah. I hear all that. Let's go ahead. We didn't have cell phones then. It was 1984 probably. And so we went to a hotel. We had a bank of phones and we each called. Ginger did most of the talking.
I love
that. And next day out in 6 or 8 newspapers comes, doctor says he's been exonerated, recommended no charges to be brought by the AMA. Now I think they were really in trouble. And then we finally got a letter from the board saying, we apologize for this and freedom of speech issue. And thank you for your contributions to mental health in Maryland.
Ooh, thank you even.
Oh, they just caved in.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
That is the way to beat psychopaths, I guess, is just expose them enough. But like you said, it's almost like we can't do it now. I mean, there's literally people who used to argue for freedom of speech, how important it was, that are now saying, you know, they know better than I do. And so...
Yeah, didn't the ACLU come out against Elon
buying
Musk?
Twitter?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the ACLU is, and it's been bad on psychiatry too, because, you know, they were woke on psychiatry in the 70s. They wanted freedom for everybody except mental patients, you know. Their psychiatrists told them that. You know?
Yeah. Man. And it just gets to be, I'm actually going to stop streaming to YouTube right now and to Twitch and to Twitter. So if you are watching there, we love you. Please come join us over on Rockfin. It's free. You can just click the link below you. They just don't censor us there on Rockfin, so we get to talk about anything we want. And although the things we've been talking about are maybe contentious among some, we're about to talk about things that will get us straight up canceled. So click the link, join us over there, and otherwise we will see you guys next time.